The following program has been made possible by a media grant provided to area nonprofits by MCAT, Missoula Community Access Television, Missoula's community media resource.
Good evening. Welcome to the 2019 Distinguished Alumni Awards ceremony. My name is Jed Liston, and I'm President and CEO of the University of Montana Alumni Association. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Denise May and Bonnie Curian for providing the sign language interpretation for tonight's program. Please join me. Strong traditions and the memories that bring alumni and friends back to the university are alive this evening. We are honored to have fellow alums, families, and friends here tonight to be celebrated. The 5 Distinguished Alumni Award recipients we celebrate tonight are remarkable individuals who have brought honor to U of M and to themselves through significant contributions to their fields. This evening we will have the unique experience of hearing some of their thoughts on education, life after college, how their personal experiences at UM shaped their prestigious careers. The discussion will be moderated by legendary Montana journalist William Marcus. He hates when we say that, but it's true. So first, Miami Tribe of Oklahoma member Darrell Baldwin received a MacArthur Foundation Genius Award in 2016 for his work to revitalize the sleeping language of Mia Mia. He serves as director of Miami University's internationally recognized Mia Mia Center and co-director of the National Breath of Life Archival Institute for the Indigenous Languages of North America, helping preserve other native languages worldwide. Darrell Baldwin. Second, Lana Richards Batts. She became the first female to be recognized with many awards from the trucking industry for her leadership in the male-dominated industry. She transformed the American Trucking Association's lobbying staff into a powerhouse and served as president of the Truckload Carriers Association before starting her own mergers and acquisitions firm and co-founding a fast-growing trucking background screening company. She is still a widely sought-after spokesperson for the industry today. Lana Batts, everyone. Dennis Eck has improved multiple organizations through technology, unique business solutions, and education. Just a few highlights include developing an education program for employees at Australia's largest retailer and community outreach programs for high school dropouts, and funding a program to save the hair of women undergoing chemotherapy. Dennis and his wife have also contributed more than $8 million to renovate UM's liberal arts building. Dennis Eck. Elizabeth Beth Schenk has led the way for sustainability in healthcare through creating one of the first hospital workplace recycling programs at our own St. Patrick Hospital. Her efforts have laid the groundwork for pollution reduction plans within the nation's third largest nonprofit health system. She is an American Academy of Nursing Fellow, Assistant Research Professor, and founder of the Montana Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate. Beth Schenk, everyone. And finally, Assiniboine and Sioux Tribes member Mandy Smoker Broadus. Mandy received recognition from former President Barack Obama and the Montana governor for her work to improve access and close achievement gaps for American Indian students as Montana's previous Director of Indian Education. A well-known writer, published poet, and Emmy winner, she recently was appointed as one of 2 poet laureates for the state of Montana. Mandy Smoker Broadus. And now I'd like to introduce UMAA Board Chair Chris Newbold. Chris has served as Executive Vice President of Alps Corporation for several years. He earned a law degree from UM in 2001, And Chris lives in Missoula along with his wife Jennifer, also a UM alum, and their children, Cameron, Mallory, and Lauren. Please welcome to the stage Chris Newbold, everyone.
Thank you, and good evening. Welcome, everyone, and I want to take this moment to recognize a number of special events, special guests here tonight who are very important to the Alumni Association and the university, and we would like to recognize them. So please hold your applause until we can kind of complete the introductions. Please stand when your group is named. Here with us tonight are past recipients of the Distinguished Alumni Award. If you could please rise. Go ahead and stay standing. Stay standing. Members of the University of Montana Alumni Association's Emissary Program, a network of dedicated volunteers from around the country. Current and past members of the University of Montana Alumni Association Board of Directors. ASUM President Abigail Belcher, Vice President Ethan Hanley, and Business Manager Daniel Parsons. By your applause, let's recognize all of these special guests. Finally, tonight, I want to welcome back alumni from the classes of 1969 and 1959 who are celebrating their 50th and 60th class anniversaries as part of the Montana Treasures Alumni Reunion Celebration. And now, to lead this evening's panel discussion, I'd like to introduce someone that I'm kind of a secret admirer of, and that's former broadcast media director and journalist William Marcus. Last year, William was recognized as one of our Distinguished Alumni Award recipients. William, who graduated from the University of Montana in 1974, retired in 2015 after 40 years in Montana broadcasting. You'll likely recognize him as the longtime host of Backroads of Montana, the award-winning Montana PBS series that highlights the state's rural communities and the residents that make them so unique. We're honored to have William here with us tonight.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to move my chair so I can actually look at these folks when I talk to them, rather than crane my neck. Thank you all for agreeing to share with us. One of the letters that someone wrote in support of one of you, a person from the Smithsonian Institution, said that by distinguishing alumni, we aspire to show others who we are as an institution and to inspire next generations within our institutions. I've got to say I've been inspired by the new banners that are up on campus that say, think critically, explore creatively, and live ethically. And I think that the five of you represent all of those qualities, and I'd like to learn a little more about you as we go. We're going to talk about leadership, language, and sustainability. And in leadership, Lana, I'd like to start with you. Always there's this discussion of your rise through a male-dominated industry. You were in Washington in 1972. Your husband had a job there. Your father was a livestock transport person, someone you referred to as a bull shipper.
Yeah, but only before I've had a drink.
So you're in Washington. You asked him to call the American Trucking Association and recommend you for a job. And?
Well, I got my first job because of nepotism. But I kept my first job because I worked really hard and because I was willing to take on issues that no one else. And, you know, my first real foray into it was the energy crisis hit. And they said, do you want to be the head of the energy department? And I raised my hand and said yes. And it's kind of one of those things, who wouldn't want the job? Didn't have a job description, didn't have a predecessor, didn't have anybody else there, and there was no Google. So what I found throughout my life was, in fact, every time I took on a job. I took on a job that was as a change agent. Because I can't imagine walking into a job where the guy that did it before, and my business was always a guy, the guy who did it before was perfect, and nobody could figure out how it could be any better. And, you know, the finances were going the right way. How boring is that? So I found myself going in and building this reputation that, give it to Lana, she can make it work. And I think that just means because I worked harder than anybody else, and I built really good teams.
So many people said that in their letters of recommendation, that you were the ultimate team builder, especially women. And so many of them said that Lana lifted us up and really helped us. You said in a comment I read that you thought that women should concentrate in areas like sales because they had measurable outcomes. What did you mean by that?
Well, I meant by that, if you're in an area where you can't measure your success versus someone else's success, then implicit biases start to come in. I mean, it's like the first job I ever got. The first thing they asked me was, can you type? And I told them no. Because if I'd have said yes, I'd end up in the typing pool. So I think that you need to get into, I've always told young people, get into something where you can be measured at the end of every year. Then you've got a leg to stand on that says, but I was better than somebody else. And, you know, I have a great deal of faith in people that are in literature and all that, because there isn't a metric. In my business, there was a metric, and it served me well.
Thank you. We'll get back on other issues. Dennis, you're from Wolf Point. I grew up in eastern Montana as well, came all the way over across the state to UM. You've talked about how the liberal arts education, they need to market it better. So I'd like to hear your elevator speech for the liberal arts.
Okay, do you have some music to go with that? Or?
Sure. You can just imagine elevator music.
Okay. I think the thing that you get with a liberal arts degree is if you experience you're going to find out something about history, you're going to find out something about political science and how to organize groups, and you're going to find out about what makes organizations function and move forward. And as you get older, you realize that those skills are really important particularly in business, because what happened with me is I was lucky enough to go into businesses that were failing. And then the first thing that I did, and I didn't realize I was doing it until much later when I had a chance to think about it, was I did a history of that company. And with a very simple question of what was it like the last time you didn't think it was broken? The next question was, if you could just do one thing to start us back to being as we once were, what would it be? And do you think it's still possible to do? And then the final is, if we work together and we can explode the vision that we have for the company and have everybody within the organization understand what we're trying to do, they not only want to do it, they've been waiting for you to get your head on straight and get it right, and things will move very quickly. So I fixed one broken business, and if you can fix one broken business, there's a lot of broken businesses around the world that go look for people like me. And so I just went to the next one, took a chance on the next one, and just went through life that way. That's why I moved so much and had so many things.
Yeah, and I think that goes to that whole critical thinking ability that comes from the liberal arts education. Darrell, I'd like to move on. You were at UM studying a wildlife biology degree, and then became interested in the Mi'amia language, which is the language of your heritage. Through discovering the work of David Costa and led you into that. So you continued your education at UM in linguistics and Native American studies. Why did you stay at UM instead of going elsewhere to look for that education?
Well, I think in my head, I really wanted to be a wildlife biologist, but in my heart, I was really feeling the need to reconnect to my cultural heritage, and I believe that my language was the way to do that. So much of that head and heart work was going on at the same time. It's kind of an interesting story in that I wanted to stay here because I liked the area, I liked the school, I liked the professors I was in. I wanted to do graduate school here. I was unsuccessful in getting into the graduate program in biology, and it was at that point that I went over to the linguistics program, and I said, what do you guys think about me doing linguistics? And they said, sure, when do you want to start? So I was kind of thrown into my passion in a sense, and forced to take that. And for me, it didn't feel like a career, because there was no field for language revitalization at that time. I was being motivated by other things, but that's what caused the turn to happen.
Right, and you've gone on to be a leader in the regeneration of languages that, as you call them, that are sleeping or forgotten. Mandy, you had a Richard Hugo Fellowship when you were here in the early 2000s. Your poetry speaks of struggle, but also resilience. And as an educator and an advocate for Indian education, what did your study at UM bring to your ability to communicate those ideas like Indian education for all?
Well, I think the discourse, the language of poetry, is an incredible tool that can be used across fields, and I've found in working with educators and students, tribes, communities, that having that ability to connect through language in meaningful ways just really helps to establish relationships in a very personal way that most people find really engaging and can really connect to.
And Beth, you basically transformed the way that many healthcare institutions deal with waste and toxic materials. You started with a degree in botany at UM. And I guess I'd like to know your sort of light bulb moment when you were then in nursing and you saw in the medical healthcare field a chance to transform the way materials were treated. What happened?
Well, really from my experience at the university and a little bit before, I developed a strong environmental ethic. I appreciated then the importance of preserving the natural world and learning to live within it, because already then, 40 years ago, it was clear that we weren't. And yet I was called to nursing and to healthcare and to caring. And I'd have to say for the first few years or so, you're just buried. It is the shock of the reality of healthcare, of really working right up against pain and suffering, of helping people die for the first time. So there were a few years of just getting used to this new language and new world and intensity of practice. But all along, I was troubled by then, 35 years ago, compared to now, it's quite different in terms of the pollution we're causing. But I was troubled by the waste. And it's so much, if anybody's been in the hospital, and I hope not everyone has, but we've all had an encounter, you can just see the incredible amount of waste that is generated, not only in garbage waste, but in electricity use and in toxic chemicals, et cetera. So my light bulb really was on, I'd say, but the shade was on, perhaps, until I got able to really start to do some actions. And my first few times were, of course, no, we can't do that. That's too complicated, and we can't do that. So it took a while, like I'd say 5 years, until I had my first success, but that was almost 30 years ago, of convincing leadership to say, yes, let's do this, let's try this. And so that has spread in many other ways beyond recycling, of course, but I'd say timing, but it was this ethic that was really deepened at my experience here.
Thank you. Let's talk about language. And in the Resources for Indian Education for All, there's this great quote from Darrell Kipp. Darrell Kipp, the Blackfeet educator and founder of the Pigin Institute, the late Darrell Kipp. Imagine if you could speak a language where you see the world alive around you. Every description, everything you see, everything you look at, everything you sense is described via the language as an action, a state of being, a state of action. Nothing is stationary, nothing is inanimate, nothing is dead, but everything is alive. Daryl, you talk about waking a sleeping language. There was no one who spoke Miamni when you started working on it. And it came from a very personal place, from your heritage. But you also found the resources not only in David Costa's work and the Jesuits from the 1600s who had, done records of the language, but in your grandfather's papers, you found things.
Right. Yeah, growing up as a child, I never heard the language spoken as a fluent language. And so other than ancestral names and place names, I had no exposure to it. And after my grandfather had passed, I was given a box of his papers or materials, and within that I found copies of an old archive that was really the first time I had actually seen any tangible language. And it really sparked me. It really kind of created a curiosity in me and really was the impetus for me pursuing, wanting to learn more about my heritage language.
And you took all of that work home because you wanted to have your family, have your children learn the language. How did you do that?
Well, this was happening at a time that my children were being born, and I think when you become parents, you start thinking about the things that you're going to pass on, and I wanted to be able to pass on more of my cultural heritage, and I saw my language as a way to do that. And because there was no tribal community-based effort at that time, the only place to do that was in the home. And so my wife and I, mainly my wife, chose to homeschool our kids, and that homeschool process lasted 18 years. And it was a chance for us to infuse language and cultural learning and education in our children from the time they were born, all four kids. So.
And Post-it notes all over the house of words and
all
phrases.
all kinds of creative ideas. I even had a ring of sentences and words I was learning on when I was a student here on campus, walking across campus, just practicing. Yeah.
And at that time, for part of the time you were on a farm, there seemed to have been some connection between agricultural terms and the language, and you decided that you needed to come up with a description of milking a goat.
Yes. So long after I left and graduated here, we started a small farm. And, it's an ecologically based culture. And so animal husbandry and engagement with the environment, the language was all there for that. It was very natural for that. And so, we had to come up with a way for how to say, it's time to milk the goats. Shia wiki nunawit, papachisia. It's time to milk those goats. And so, having a command of the language, understanding the morphology, and in the right context is allowed us to move the language into a living, breathing life back into that language as a living language for daily use.
Bandy, I'd like to read part of a poem that you wrote called The Feed. And it's the last part of it. You're talking about a family that's gathering for a meal. Aunties carry the full pots and pans to the picnic table. An uncle prays over our food in Assiniboine. We all want to forget that we don't understand this language. We spend lots of time trying to forget in different ways. No one notices that the wild turnips are still simmering in a pot on the stove. You're a person who chooses words very carefully. As you work in American Indian education issues, how can we as a society improve the way that we speak across cultural lines?
I do want to answer that, but first I just want to say what the tremendous amount of respect I have for language revitalization efforts across this country, and I just think it's more than just losing something significant. It's the experiences that led to that circumstance that are so painful, and my own grandparents, going to boarding schools, being forced to go to boarding schools, and learning to be ashamed of their language and heritage and culture and ways of knowing, and coming home and not wanting to teach their children something that they thought would bring them shame or harm. And all of that history is a part of that continuum, and it takes such courage and tenacity, because language is trying to repair, language is the way that we can repair a lot of those atrocities and terrible things that happened. But I forgot your question, Warren. I just wanted to
how can we communicate more carefully across cultural languages with respect?
I think, and this is something I talk with educators about quite frequently, is it's very, very important to know your story, know the place from which you operate from, and that circumstance is unique and very important, but there are variances to that, and there are different lenses with which people have viewed the world and been taught about the world and how to interact. And so I think in education and really in all circles, just knowing and having a presence and awareness of that your space and your lens, your critical lens, is not the same as everyone else's, and none is better than the other, and to have respect and compassion, and to just realize that you're trying to create a space, I think, in education and in all types of dialogue and communication and connection, where it's a space where people can feel safe and appreciated, and you're trying to encourage and bring out the best in all people.
Beth, the world of healthcare has its own arcane language. You've come up with tools that are described as, with acronyms, NEAT, the Nurses Environmental Assessment Tool, and CHANT, the Climate, Health, and Nursing Tool. A person who wrote a letter in support of your nomination said that you were a rare student who had the ability to not only conceptualize something, but also then go on to analyze it and implement it. And I'm wondering about what language you use to tell people, especially people in decision-making positions, how to make a change in that arcane language.
Well, they say you need to say something 7 times and in 7 ways to get through to people. And I have experienced that, definitely. People don't read emails, don't read signs. So there's lots of repeating and in different ways. But I think that would be the same for any operational sort of thing where you're trying to make changes, make policy changes, et cetera. So partly there's technical stuff that is just knowledge that is shared, and that is the easy side. Partly there's reminders and holding people accountable as possible. It's a little harder, but we try and build that in our health system, which is Providence St. Joseph Health. But the part about convincing, I think, is speaking to people's better selves and their higher goals, and working it in our organization, for instance, into our mission, which we're very committed to. People come to me with questions about meaning of this work in their life, largely related to fears for their children or concerns about different exposures that they might be having. So wherever possible, I think to talk to people where their concerns are, and also to have an idea of something that's a little bit optimistic for them, because this work can be heavy and overwhelming if people, start to pay a lot of attention to it. So it's not necessarily so specific to healthcare, I don't think. But in healthcare, you need to know the healthcare language as well, because you're right, you can just rattle off an entire paragraph of abbreviations that everybody says, yeah,
Thank you. Dennis, the language of the boardroom doesn't always translate across every level in an organization. But you have established initiatives for education, for training, for outreach to high school dropouts, especially in Australia, for women's advancement, and the scholarship that you and your wife Gretchen set up in the Native American Studies program. All of that speaks to a deep commitment and understanding of education and how it helps people communicate in advance. What words do you use to get people in the boardroom to understand your vision and need for the employees and others?
Well, I'm not persuasive enough to persuade many of the boards I've worked with, so I have to figure out another way to do it. And very often, if you can build a working model of how you're engaging your employees, or the training program that we put together that led to college degrees for, I think, 12,000 kids or something, and we had really good success with bringing kids who had dropped out of school back into the mainstream. And we gave them full-time work. And the board looked at that, because what was going on in the world at that time was downsizing, outsourcing, and removing the contract for mutual benefit that should exist between the employees, the management, the community, and yourself. And so what I was able to do by doing it without asking their permission, probably one of the reasons I got fired sometimes, but I always thought that if you could demonstrate that training somebody and giving them a full-time job and giving them a sense of belonging to something that was worthwhile and something that would reestablish their connection with something, by the time that idea gets up to the board, it's so powerful, they don't have a way of saying no. And it's really the performance situation is sort of upside down today, sometimes, at least as I look at it, where the board thinks that EPS or some silly leverage thing that's over in the accounting school is what they're managing. They're not. They're managing the outcomes for the people within the organization, in the community, with their suppliers, and importantly with the people who own their shares of stock. And all can be done, but you can't start with the first one that says, I'm going to maximize the value of that share of stock today, because that leads you into all of those short-term decisions, which actually move you further from your objective. And so I was able to have a pretty good success rate with having the boards understand what we were trying to do and why it was worth supporting, and also to earn at the level that the market needed.
Lana, one person wrote that when Lana speaks, everybody listens. They also talked about your team building abilities, your getting everybody to buy in on what you were doing. Another said that you know how to organize constituencies, present solutions, and secure the votes to get necessary for passage. These are from truck drivers to investors to politicians. They may have their own language. How do you find the commonality in the words you use to make these groups work in ways to the benefit of the organizations?
Well, I was on the debate team. And,
at UM.
Pardon?
At UM.
At U of M, actually married my debate partner. Lasted 51 years, but within the Robert's Rules of Orders.
I understand you were on the luge team as well.
That's true. Yeah. But that was because I was young and dumb and thought I'd live forever. I always viewed, I always hired people that were smarter than me. It kept me on my toes. It kept me abreast of what was going on. I always tried to hire people that thought differently than me. I guess that's diversity before it became the word, because I was looking for people who connected the dots differently than I did, or saw dots I didn't see at all. And so by doing that and encouraging, certainly among my staff, to come in and argue with me. I love to argue. People that got the facts. And what it meant for the staff is sometimes they were right and they won, you know. And so you patted them on the back. Because it takes a lot to stand up to me, because I'm so quiet and shy and reserved. And
I noticed that.
yeah. But I think that's how you build teams, is you encourage that kind of discussion. And then when you start to deal with trucking company executives, one of my members in the audience here is owned a Montana trucking company, to try to figure out exactly, you know, what was it they were trying to get out of the government affairs? What was the pain point? And how could we try to solve that pain point? Usually what happens is we didn't solve it, we just tried to delay the pain or minimize the pain, but it was hard to eliminate the pain. But I think, again, trying to figure out what their dots were, and then trying to figure out how to connect those dots. And then I always was looking for a win-win, which is probably why I left politics in 2000, because it became such a sport that was a blood sport. Whereas when I got into it, it was, you could disagree without being disagreeable. And I like a good debate, but, you know, I don't care what your parentage is, and I don't care what your patriotism is. I'm assuming we were all Americans, and that's why I had to get out, because that kind of ability to communicate, everybody now operates in an echo chamber, and the kinds of discussions we used to have really hard to do, and I couldn't do my job today.
I'd like to move on to sustainability, and we have a little less time for this round, maybe. And Beth, you're the leader here in sustainability. One person wrote, "What would it be like if everyone acted like Beth Shank?" It would be a greener home for all, more peaceful, more integrated, and frankly, a lot healthier. Wow. What's your best hope and advice that you pass along to the nursing students you see?
For nursing students specifically, to remember and be aware of what our profession calls us to do. And we have one of our scope, our standards of practices, the registered nurse practices in an environmentally safe and healthy manner. And I bet if you ask the 4 million nurses in the nation about that, about maybe a few thousand would know it. So that's one of my crusades nationally, is not only that statement, but our commitment to the public health, our commitment to all of those ideals that people value, justice and respect, etc. And that it's a crucial time as we face our environmental crisis to be able to integrate the normal work that we do with a different vision and a different way of moving into the future. And that we can do it. And so I think everybody gets overwhelmed by this problem, and in healthcare, it's moving so fast, it's hard to get people's attention sometimes, but that too is part of what we're called to do, and that's part of something that we can do.
Thank you. Dennis, you've made a big investment in in scholarship support programs, the upgrade of the LA building. Found an old postcard of the liberal arts building. It's mid-century architecture and its great splendor. To see that building come back to that, to its original, that I remember when I was on campus, I like that a lot, and the fact that it's going to be in a sustainable way and whatever. You also wanted it to be filled with technology, because you have called technology the great equalizer. And you said you envision an experience that links learning from that building to continents, not only continents around the world, but also students in Wolf Point who could listen in and participate from home. The next generation has always been a focus for you, hasn't it?
Well, yes. I think the thing that happens is that sometimes we have a tendency of chopping off at certain, you get to the computer and you chopped it off, and then along came social media, for example, and you have to be careful not to chop it off. But what was on my mind when I took my stroll across campus, that turned out to be more than a stroll, but was I looked at that and I thought of all of the places where the knowledge that existed in that building could be beamed almost at the speed of light via satellite or rapid downloads to any place in the world. So the original thought that I had as I walked in the door was that I wanted to combine the New South Wales Native American Studies program with a program that would be really important for, and I know is being worked on, important for the University of Montana. And what we realize now is that there are no barriers to knowledge. It's just the delivery systems. But if you're going to build a building and you're building it for today, it means you're not going to be able to do tomorrow's delivery systems. So when we spec'd it, we spec'd 19 terabytes of data in that, which we could probably run a country out of that. But the idea was that we would not build in obsolescence and that we would easily be able to change and move. And my original idea was that if we could figure out a way of getting kids their first year of university remotely, and they could learn the most important thing that they would learn in their first year, which is they're capable of learning what's being taught, that we could then bring them onto a campus and have them be very successful, and also with a track record that would allow them to be helped financially so they didn't run up to huge student debt. And we had some very interesting conversations within the liberal arts building about the concept of how this could work and how you protect the intellectual property of the professors. And so it's not a simple thing to deal with. And the people in the building, most people don't realize that they're the ones who actually designed it. They designed what they wanted for communications. They designed what they wanted for how to teach, what to teach, and what they needed to teach. And then we just sort of went along and built it. Now, I did put my 2 cents in a couple of times, but well, you can't build for what you know today. If you do that, you're just doomed to failure.
Mandy, Richard Hugo once used the phrase, making certain it goes on. Your work as a poet, as an educator, as a tireless advocate for Indian education issues, all point to a deep belief in resilience and renewal. And I'd like you to reflect on what someone in college today can do to prepare themselves for a multicultural, respectful, and inclusive world.
Yeah, there's a great deal of work left to be done. Equity, inclusion, social justice is a long, long journey. And in Montana, just acknowledging that we have a complicated history here, and there are still challenges that we need to overcome as far as relating to one another, understanding one another from an authentic place. And that's really the hope of Indian Education for All. Montana was the first state to have such a mandate and to fund it and to really encourage schools, whether they have an Indian student or not, to teach more accurate and authentic information about American Indians, because the reality is there's still a great deal of bias, stereotype, and misconception out there that's perpetuated in almost every venue you can imagine, including our educational systems. And so trying to break down that systemic, it's an intentional system that's designed to hold some people back. And Indian Education for All hopes and dreams that if we give all children a better place to operate from in understanding one another culturally, linguistically, historically, that they will see eye to eye in different and more profound ways in the future, and that will change Montana. It will change the landscape and nature of how we work together, how we interact, how we lead together, and what Montana becomes in the future.
Daryl, one person wrote, and I don't know whether they're quoting you directly here or not, maybe you wrote this, that reviving a language can take documentation, but reclaiming it takes a community that identifies with it and individuals who want to reclaim it. You also, not only the Nyamia Center, but also the Breath of Life Institute, you work with a lot of different languages. What is the future of languages that are on the margin?
Well, unfortunately, in the modern rhetoric, especially in the news, languages are often labeled dying, going extinct. And really, a lot of our communities are in transition and have been for a couple of hundred years, and that transition has been very heavy. Language and cultural revitalization, which almost have to go together, are very much part of a healing process, allowing a community to reestablish itself in a modern context for a purpose into the future. And the work of that requires community, but also leadership. There has to be a community that wants to reconnect to their heritage, language and culture, much as I did on a personal level, but more broadly on a community level. And there has to be the leadership in place at the tribal level to support that. And when those two things come together, and that work is happening together, it is incredibly empowering. And that's one of the things that gives me a tremendous amount of hope that we may never live as a village-centered people that we did 300 years ago, but our language and culture is going to have a purpose in the future, and we're trying to figure out what that purpose is going to be. And that's important work that we have to do.
Lana, your work in transportation and the transportation industry is legendary. But you also have built bridges in the nonprofit world. For instance, encouraging the Montana Audubon Society to work with UM's Bird Ecology Lab and the eBird program. And also analyzing visitor trends for the Glacier National Park Conservancy. It's a broad portfolio that you've maintained. Have you always had an interest in the natural world and sustaining that part of our future?
Well, you can't not grow up in Montana and not appreciate the beauty of where we are here. You live to Washington, D.C., you kind of lose a little bit of that. But my husband and I have always been very much engaged in the West, very much engaged in birds. We're not quite as hardcore as some people, but we understand that if you love birds, you better start loving the environment. And so we've always been there. But when we moved back to Montana, we said, we're going to get engaged. We owe this university and this state a lot. And so what we said is, let's bring the skills that we had and try and figure it out. So it was like at the Glacier National Park Conservancy, there's a horrible problem. We just got too many visitors and not enough infrastructure. I mean, the park was designed for 600,000 people and they had 3 million. And so how do we figure out to run that? And I don't know anything about shuttles, but I do know how to count, okay? And so it becomes, take those skill sets that we learned here and then start applying them in different ways that you can help. And so that's what we've tried to do. And then as an alum, when we found out through Korea Bruner here, you know, what they were doing with birding in the United States, I mean, we thought Cornell was the only place that was studying birds. Find out, you know, the Bird Ecology Lab here is world-renowned. And then we saw what Cornell was doing, in fact, with eBird, which was taking citizen science and helping people build these databases so we can see what's happening in the natural world. Because birds are the canary. And so what we've been able to do is to really take our skills and bring them back and pay it forward. And so that's really what we were trying to do. And you know, I mean, we're never going to retire and play golf. That's just not who we are. So what we found is around here, if we said, ask us something, we'll raise our hand, and we've discovered that we keep raising our hand and they keep asking. So we're having a great time.
It's a great way to end this. Congratulations to all 5 of you, and thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you've all discovered why I use the term legendary. Please join me in thanking William for that wonderful interview set. Now, it's my honor to introduce Denise Grills. Denise is a member of the UM Alumni Association Board of Directors and serves as chair of the Recognition Committee, which includes selection of the Distinguished Alumni Awards, the Legacy Scholarship, and Grizzly of the Last Decade Award. She's an advisor to the Montana Women's Leadership Initiative on campus. Denise is a vice president of content development with Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from UM and an MBA from Southern Methodist University. Ladies and gentlemen, Denise Grills.
Thank you. I'm awed and proud. Thank you all. Thank you, Jed, and good evening, everyone. It's my privilege to serve on your Alumni Association board and to share information tonight with you about the Legacy Scholarship. Student applicants are required to submit an application, including a written essay, which is very important, to the association. Students must have completed at least 60 credits and have had a family member attend the University of Montana to be considered. This year we had a highly competitive pool of applicants, and our recognition committee carefully reviewed and made these selections. These scholarships are awarded from an endowed scholarship fund, a fund that grows through designated donations. We'd love to have more scholarships to award. So if you're interested in helping with this, please see the Alumni Association or speak with a board member. Now I'd like to introduce this year's Alumni Legacy Scholarship recipients and ask them to stand to be recognized. Please hold your applause until all have been introduced. Reese Brandon, please stand. Our first recipient is Reese Brandon, a pre-professional exercise science major from Kalispell. Taylor Gregory is a political science major from Lolo. Taylor is studying abroad this semester in Belgium and is unable to attend the ceremony. Anna Kenny, please stand. Anna is a human biological sciences major from Vero Beach, Florida. Molly Putnam, a management information systems and finance major from Billings, is also participating in the study abroad program this fall in Cork and cannot attend the ceremony. Madison Reichelt, please stand. Madison is an exercise science and human biological science major from Big Sandy. Ryan Sandow, please stand. Ryan is a computer science and management and information systems major from Missoula. Kinsey Smith, please stand. Kinsey is the is in the Doctor of Pharmacy program and is a Missoulian. Keegan Whelan, please stand. Keegan is also in the pharmacy program and hails from Butte, my hometown. Madison Wickens, please stand. And Madison is in the English teaching program and came to UM from Clarkston, Washington. Please give a round of applause for the 2019 Legacy Scholarship recipients. And thank you. You can sit down. So you can see your program for additional information on these very bright and accomplished students. For more information on how to nominate yourself or others for the UMAA Legacy Scholarship, the Grizzly of the Last Decade Award, which is our students who have attended the university and graduated within the last 10 years, or the Distinguished Alumni Award, visit grizzalum.org. Can you all remember that? grizzalum.org. And we would love to have more nominations for all of those. So thank you.
Thank you, Denise. There are two additional students in the audience tonight whom we'd like to recognize. Each year, the University of Montana Alumni Association selects homecoming ambassadors from a pool of student applicants. The selection is based upon academic achievement, participation in service organizations, and personal commitment to campus and community. This year, 2 students are being recognized as the 2019 Homecoming Ambassadors. I would ask them to stand and be recognized, and please hold your applause again until I finish introducing each of them. First up, Cam Magnan. Cam, please stand. Cam is the son of Darius and Carrie Magnan. Although he was born in Missoula, he moved and graduated in Kuski. Did I get that? Kuski, sorry, Idaho. And I should have checked that pronunciation. And was excited to return to attend the University of Montana. A junior studying physical education and health, Cam loves U of M because of the community that surrounds the Grizz family, the resources and opportunities that have allowed him to grow, and most importantly, the pride and tradition that come from being a UM student. When he isn't in class, you can see him giving tours of UM, socializing at campus and community events, or studying in the UC Commons. Cam is a proud member of the UM Advocates, Grizzly Christian Fellowship, and men's basketball manager as Grizzly basketball as a manager, and I attribute most of their success to Cam. Most recently, spurring from his Big Sky Experience group, he started the Zoo Crew to help mold student leaders, create unity, and enhance the student section experience on game days. Cam is so excited for the rest of this football season, but even more excited to see the students' energy and participation this basketball season. He is honored and humbled to be selected as UM's homecoming ambassador and looks forward to a great game and prosperous year for the University of Montana. Cam, everyone. Okay. Next is Kaylee Osentowski. Kaylee is the daughter of Mark and Tammy Osentowski. Originally from Great Falls, Montana, she is a senior at UM majoring in business, dance, and theater. Kaylee loves the thriving art community in Missoula and the many opportunities she's been gifted at UM. She has worked with the Montana Repertory Theater and in 2018 interned with Walt Disney World Parks in Orlando, Florida. While not in class, Kaylee can be found dancing, stage managing, or exploring downtown Missoula. Kaylee is a proud member of the Davidson Honors College and is the student representative for UM Dance. She is extremely honored to be selected as one of the 2019-2020 UM Homecoming Ambassadors and is looking forward to the year ahead. Congratulations to Cam and Kaylee as our Homecoming Ambassadors. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the President of the University of Montana, Seth Bodner, who will say a few words, and then he'll help us present tonight's awards.
All right. Thank you, Jed, and thank you, everyone, for being here. I want to start, of course, by congratulating our Distinguished Alumni Award recipients. We are so honored to highlight the incredible successes of these individuals on this stage today. They bring tremendous credit to this university, and we are proud to call them a part of the UM family. So thank you for everything you've done for our communities, for our society, and in bringing credit to this amazing university. We are honored to have you here and to honor your lives of achievement this weekend. And you know, I tell people one of the favorite parts of my job is, as the university president, I get to spend time with our incredible alumni, people at various stages of their careers, early in their careers, near the end of their careers. And then I get to spend time with high school seniors about to come to the University of Montana, students at the University of Montana. And one of the things that I really love about this event each year is we hear about the incredible lives of some of our most distinguished alumni, and then we hear about the students who are receiving legacy scholarships and the students who are homecoming ambassadors this year. And to see the, it's like watching and pulling different parts, looking at a film strip and getting to look at different parts of people's lives. Because at the heart of what makes the University of Montana special, and education in general special, is that it is about enabling people to achieve their full potential. And we read tonight and we listened to, and we'll get to hear from 5 individuals who've had such a tremendous impact on our society. And we see here with us also people at the beginning of their journey. And we get to see the impact that this university, this UM family will have on them. And we get to imagine the impact that they will have over the course of their careers. And that's something that gets me up in the morning every day and makes me feel so grateful and honored to be part of this university, to be part of this UM family. So thank you all for joining us tonight. To our students, take note. These are individuals who've set a high bar for you. And to our distinguished alumni, also take note, because they're going to be putting a dent in this world too, and you've set good examples for them, and I thank you for that. So thank you all for being part of this terrific event, and congratulations again to our recipients.
Thank you so much, President Bodner. Now it's time to make these awards. So please welcome Darrell Baldwin to the podium. Get a picture.
I wanted to express through my language the great honor that I have for receiving this. I could never have dreamed of coming back under such conditions, but also to the many individuals who felt that I was deserving of it and supported my application, the selection committee, all those involved, many of which I probably don't know. A lot of these times you don't know who submits your letters and so on and so forth. But it's an incredible opportunity. In 1992, my wife and I had left Southern Ohio, headed for Montana. We had 2 young children. We arrived in the valley here, and there wasn't family housing available. They were full. And at that time, in our younger lives, we could not afford the rent to a place here in town. So we took what little money we had, and we bought an outfitter's tent. And then we went and we bought a stove, a cook stove. And we traveled up along Lolo Creek, headed up towards Lolo Pass. We didn't go quite that far, looking for a campsite that we might establish a temporary home for ourselves. And we found one. And for 6 weeks, we lived in the tent with 2 young kids. I would take them down to the creek every day and give them a bath, and my wife was able to find a local job, and we waited for family housing to open a place for us. We were largely driven by the sense of adventure, but also self-discovery. And I can't say that I knew it at that time, but the next 6 years that we would spend here in Missoula would be a continuation of that exploration. And of course, I would come to become involved in a field that didn't really exist at that time, the field of indigenous language revitalization. But here we are in 2019, and the United Nations has declared 2019 as the International Year of Indigenous Languages. And so we've come a long ways, and I'm very proud to be part of that movement to raise awareness for our languages. A lot of times when Americans think of other languages, they think of those other languages belonging to an other place. But for indigenous people, our languages are from this land, this place. And if they're going to be spoken, they're going to be spoken here. And so it's really important for society and the higher institutions within that society to support these initiatives, much like my tribe and the university I currently work at have a very deep relationship that now stretches almost 50 years. I encourage my alma mater to continue to develop those relationships here in Montana, and I know that that they have a desire to work with and support tribes, and to be creative, to put on that thinking cap. Many of the guests here tonight, many of the recipients, talked about innovation and creativity, and that's what it's going to take to solve this. So I just want to say how proud I am to be here, how proud I am to be from the University of Montana, and I look forward to what the future brings. Missionewe, thank you.
Please welcome Lana Richards-Batts to the podium.
It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and my fellow recipients just absolutely inspire me. And I just find it amazing that we all came out of a liberal arts area, and look at the diversity of where we ended up. And yet I think we all come back to saying, it's what we see around campus, it was the ability to think creatively, and no, I've got it wrong. It's anyway, we'll figure it out. But it's a pleasure to be here, and my family's here. I'm so excited about that. And Ray Kuntz is here. He's one of the only Montanans that was chairman of the board of the American Trucking Association. And Larry Behrens from the Montana Audubon is here. And that really makes me feel really wonderful. I never would have guessed 51 years ago that I would be up here. I couldn't wait to get out of Missoula. In fact, I did it in 3 years. I graduated exactly the number of credits that I needed and not one more. Now I wonder why I was in such a hurry. I clearly missed some great classes that were outside of the liberal arts field. I'm sure there was some extracurricular events I didn't go to. And I knew darn well I missed some really great underage drinking parties. But at least I was smart enough to marry my college debate partner, Joe, the week after we graduated. But in those 3 short years, I gained the knowledge, I gained the skills, and I gained the insights necessary for a remarkable career, a great life, and a terrific marriage. But like Dennis, at the time, it didn't really dawn on me that that was it. As you get older, you start to reflect in terms of how lucky you are. It's amazing that I graduated. At the time, the University of Montana had a requirement that you had to swim the length of the pool. I had taken swimming lessons, and it looks like I tried to swim backwards. And I was getting at the end of what I needed, and I couldn't get to the end of the pool. And finally, there was an instructor that said, Lana, I don't care how you do it. Just get to the end of the pool. I don't care how long it takes. Just do it, and I'll pass you, and you can graduate. Maybe she wanted to get rid of me. But I did it, and I got there. And it was one of life's first great lessons. Show no fear, develop a plan, and just do it. Now, I wish I'd trademarked that just do it and I'd make a lot of money. My first real job was at the American Trucking Associations. At the time, I didn't realize that I was the highest paid female and the lowest paid professional. If I'd have known it, I really would have been mad. I was just excited I had a job. And about 3 months after being there, the Arab oil embargo hit. And they came around and they said, can anyone here spell diesel? This is in 1973, the winter of 73. Well, I was a University of Montana graduate. I knew it was I before E except after C. I raised my hand. The next thing I know, I'm the Director of Energy for the American Trucking Association. It's a good thing I didn't realize what that meant. But the reality of it is, my liberal arts education gave me the ability to think creatively. How are we going to solve the fact that the United States just lost 40% of all the oil that was imported from the Arabs? how do we explore creatively and try and come up with solutions? I'm going to add a few more. Write clearly, communicate succinctly, negotiate effectively, develop a plan, offer recommendations, and implement them. That makes you tomorrow-proof. And those were the skills that I learned. And every once in a while, you have to get some reaffirmation of this, and mine came in the form of an unsolicited phone call from a guy by the name of Alan Greenspan. He was at the time the head of the Council of Economic Advisors, and they were trying to figure out how to ration diesel for the trucking industry. I don't know why he called me, because I'm certainly not going to tell him how to do it. But we had a long conversation. And at the end of the meeting, you know, he didn't know who I was. I didn't know who he was. But, in fact, I was just trying to figure out how to get to the end of the pool. But the reality of it is, that never came up again. And obviously, I took those lessons, and we did them. Being the lone woman executive in the trucking industry was never easy. Sometimes you would get hit against the side of the head in places you really hadn't expected. Mine happened in the second Arab oil embargo. My career was based upon embargoes. I got a call from a New York Times reporter, and he was asking about the embargo and how it was affecting the trucking industry. We really got off on the wrong foot immediately, and he said, I need to talk to the guy who's in charge of energy. And I said, yeah, can I help you? And he repeated the question, and I answered the same. And he said, no, I need to talk to the guy. I am the guy. And at the end of the call, he said, you know, for a girl, you know a lot about energy. Well, at the time, I was a 32-year-old woman, and I wanted to drown him in a barrel of diesel. But life's great second lesson, knowledge, succinctly delivered, destroys stereotypes. And I learned how to do that here. So President Bodner, your message that the liberal arts degree prepares you for jobs that didn't exist today is absolutely correct. The Director of Energy for the American Trucking Associations did not exist when I graduated. But I had the tools from that liberal arts degree to have a very successful career, a visible career, in a very interesting business. Again, it's a wonderful honor, and I want to thank you very much, because I finally learned how to get to the end of the pool, business-wise, but I still can't swim.
Please welcome Dennis Eck.
I just broke the rules again. But the part of what I'd like to say, just to, first of all, thanks to everybody who made this a really special event. The chance to come back and do this was something that far exceeded my expectations of how I'd feel at the end, which is always a nice feeling. And so I do appreciate that. The other thing that has happened is Gretchen and I have moved around the country and also the world a great deal, and we don't quite have a home per se, because we've traveled and lived in so many different places. And one of the things that at least I'm finding, and hopefully she's finding, is a great connection with the university, and it's bringing us back to the roots that we came from. And so I have a lot of pride in being from Montana. I have a lot of pride of having been lucky enough to get a chance to give something back to the university. And then I would make one other comment, and it's for the people in the room. One of the things that I noticed as I started, or we started down this journey of trying to turn that old building into a nicer looking old building, is that I had forgotten just how engaged and how much people will become involved in Montana if you ask them to do something and it makes sense to do. So I take a great deal of pride in that building that some of you were at this afternoon, was actually done by the people in the building. Jenny, who's sitting in the front row, hoping that I won't look at her, she and others actually did the design of what you saw. We worked with faculty, we worked with students, and we took their ideas and we made them a part of what we were building. In fact, I got told no more often than I got told yes. But at the end of it, at what I thought was going to be the end of it, along came that next opportunity, which is if you're building a building that's designed to reach out and participate in something like a sea change or a chance to go further with the university into more groups and provide more opportunity for people and deal with the gender issues and all of those things that we face. So just as I'm finishing with the building part, along that comes that, and Rankin Hall is my favorite building too, and so how could you say no to that if you built something that was designed to do that? But I said this, it's a long time ago now, 5 years we've been at this. The one thing that you can count on is if you give somebody from the University of Montana some money to spend on improving itself, they're going to squeeze the dime until there's nothing left because they'll give you every bit of value. And I just have a tremendous respect and appreciation for the people that I worked with as I was doing that, and feel very connected to the state of Montana and very connected to the University of Montana. So thank you.
Please welcome Beth Schenk.
Thank you. Thank you, President Bodnar, the Alumni Association, and thank you to Dr. Sarah Hayden, who nominated me for this honor, and for colleagues who wrote letters of support. And I'm not sure who they are either. I came to Montana on a family trip to Glacier Park when I was 11. The penetrating beauty shifted something in me, even then, and it planted the seed that I must return, which I did to the university a few years later. Two programs in particular in my undergraduate work were particularly formative. The biological station at Yellow Bay on Flathead Lake, where I spent a summer tromping around studying the natural world of western Montana, incredulous at the beauty and intensity and abundance I saw. Then the Wilderness and Civilization program, backpacking along the Rocky Mountain front, studying ethics, policy, politics of land management, particularly for wilderness. Both of these opportunities demonstrated to me the university's innovation and foresight and the value of its position in the world, the backdrop and classroom of the phenomenal land around us. My deep immersion in these experiences laid the foundation for my later career in nursing and healthcare, particularly addressing environmental impacts there. I have been a nurse now for going on 35 years. Nurses make crucial contributions from the high-tech world of acute care in public health and schools, as university faculty, as researchers. We spend time and closeness in trusting relationships when individuals and families that we care for are going through some of the hardest things they ever do. It's a privilege to be there, to be present, reliably, and skilled when people need help. And yet, even early on as a nurse, it bothered me that we created so much waste, used so much stuff, used so much energy. I was torn between my love and care for the natural world, including the balance and resilience of ecosystems that I learned about here, and the crucial work of nursing, literally saving lives and relieving suffering, yet doing so in a polluting industry. This collision of worldviews led me to my second very valuable encounter with the university. I spent several years in the graduate school in philosophy. Looking back on this experience, I see its importance to my maturing, integrating my thinking, developing perspective about different viewpoints, conceptualized in different eras and cultures. I wrestled down some demons of confusion in those years and began to resolve the collision of worlds that I had felt. It was after this, still almost 30 years ago, that I committed myself to addressing healthcare-generated pollution. It's not always easy to keep perspective. The urgency of the ill person in front of us makes reducing pollution seem irrelevant or remote at the moment. Yet healthcare is quite polluting, it turns out. And we are now at a point worse than when I was in school 40 years ago. There are fewer wild spaces, less room for other species, more pollution from toxic chemicals, and now we see the impacts of climate change. The urgency of our ecological crisis, really our socio-ecological crisis, is escalating. The complexity of trying to resolve this crisis can be overwhelming, to say the least, but I think the university is particularly suited to contribute solutions to this conundrum, arguably the most pressing issue we face as humans. The solutions will not be only technological, nor only political, nor only market-driven, nor only based on individual behaviors. It will require all of these and more, including wrestling with what it means to be putting ourselves at risk as a species, the ethical dimensions, the practical challenges, how we talk with each other about it when these conversations can be difficult. Many students entering college today feel this bind and crave understanding and resolution when faced with much uncertainty for their future lives. The University of Montana is uniquely situated as it offers a rare combination of solid scholarship in environmental science, climate studies, ethics, business, arts, with this incredible land and its heritage over thousands of years. UM offers a place and time where students can immerse themselves into the science and mechanics of nature, into how land management and policy impacts our future, how we can design our lives and communities with more resilience, more sustainability, and thus more optimism. UM is a magnet for people who care about this, as it was for me. UM can give people what they need to transform the world. The bedrock I found at UM is still that upon which I stand, and I'm forever grateful. Thank you.
Please welcome Mandy Smoker Broadus.
Oh, I want to thank everyone associated with this tremendous, hi, Denise. Love you. Okay. It's such an honor, and I am just a range of emotions associated with it, and I just feel very incredibly lucky and fortunate, and everyone who's coordinated and planned, and my fellow honorees, thank you for all you've contributed to this beautiful world and the legacy of the University of Montana. I do have one funny little story to share. I applied to the MFA program one time and didn't get in. And then I thought, this can't stand. This can't be. So I worked harder, built a better poetry portfolio to send in the second time, and then was awarded the Richard Hugo Fellowship. I was like, do they know? Are they aware of what just happened? But it worked out in the end very, very well. I'm a 50-plus generation Montanan. And sometimes it really feels like a miracle that I even get to do what I do, that I get to just be alive, really, thinking about so much history and context. And I'm sure many Native students on campus have similar sentiments and feelings. We're the hope and dreams of our ancestors who endured terrible, terrible circumstances and atrocities, and then have to come and face deliberate systems that at times seem to want to keep you out and to deny you a seat at the table. And so when I came to the University of Montana, I was so happy to find an inclusive community in the MFA program. I had just lost my mother, and having the opportunity to explore art and creativity and my voice was a tether back to the world after grieving for so long. And so it was a necessity for me. And that community, both the writers or the professors and writers themselves, standing on the shoulders of Richard Hugo and James Welch, and my mentor, Patricia Gotica, was a tremendous, tremendous opportunity to learn from their skill and their determination and their love of writing and creativity. And then to have a fellow body of other writers that wanted to build their voice, to find a place in the literary world. Not so much, poets, we have such fame and fortune, but just to have your expression out in the world and to be valued and to be seen and heard. So I'm incredibly grateful that I found that here at the university. And I just encourage, again, more diversity and finding ways to bring more tribal students into this important space and to allow their voices to be heard and a seat at the table, to bring them here and to keep them here, and to have more folks like me up here in the future receiving this award. I thought I would close with a poem. Heart Butte, Montana. The unsympathetic wind, how she has evaded me for years now, leaving a guileless shell and no way to navigate. Once when I stood on a plateau of earth just at the moment before the dangerous jutting peaks converged upon the lilting sway of grasslands, I almost found a way back. There, the sky, quite possibly all the elements, caused the rock and soil and vegetation to congregate. Their prayer was not new, and so faint I could hardly discern. Simple remembrances, like a tiny syncopated chorus, calling everyone home, across 1,000 eastward miles, and what little wind was left at my back. But I could not move, and then the music was gone. All that was left were the springtime faces of mountains gazing down, their last patches of snow luminous. I dreamed of becoming snowmelt, gliding down the slope and into the valley, with the promise and assurance that there is always a way to become bird, tree, water again. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished alumni, please join me. How can you not be inspired? This concludes our 2019 Distinguished Alumni Awards ceremony. We invite each of you to stay and celebrate with us here in the ballroom. We will open up this back wall to a wonderful reception and get a chance to visit with these fine folks. My thanks and all of our thanks to the Alumni Relations team for their work in organizing this very special event, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. We do invite you to participate and celebrate in all of the homecoming traditions that keep our university strong, and please don't miss the Homecoming Yell Night Pep Rally that takes place on the Oval at 8 p.m., and this year it's graciously sponsored by Stockman Bank. So thank you all for coming, and good night.
This production was made possible by a media grant provided to area nonprofits by MCAT, Missoula Community Access Television. For more information about MCAT, visit us at mcat.org. MCAT, Missoula's community media resource.